This show has been nonstop. This kind of thing. It's hilarious. It's been nonstop. Technical problems.
That's exciting.
So let me introduce you and then we'll get started. So I'm here today with Greg, who is an international life, personal, and mental skills development coach. He's also a hypnotherapist and works with entrepreneurs, businesses, motorsports, and the public. Greg McColl holds diplomas in hypnotherapy and cognitive techniques for stress management in business that he uses to help people gain clarity, focus, motivation, and manage stress. So welcome, Greg. What exactly is a mindfulness coach, for starters?
Now, that's a very interesting question. I think there's a very definite term of what most people mean when they think mindfulness. When it comes to stress and anxiety and overwhelm, I think mindfulness is a much broader thing, because somebody who's experiencing high levels of stress and anxiety, mindfulness isn't actually that attainable or useful to them when they're in that crisis moment. Mm-hmm. You know, telling somebody who's in absolute overwhelm quietly with their thoughts, the sheer thought of that for them strikes them with absolute terror. So for me, mindfulness is a very broad term for focus and slowing things down, because most people are experiencing stress and anxiety and overwhelm are 1,000 miles an hour. You know, the catastrophizing, the overwhelm, everything's happening now. And if you can begin to slow things down. So for me, when I'm leading people towards mindfulness, it's a combination of mindfulness techniques and sort of self-hypnosis to enable them to narrow their focus down, maybe into the body, maybe into another sense, whether it's hearing or sight or the kinesthetic nature of something, and just slow things down so that they can get a breath.
So what techniques do you suggest people use in order to do that?
Right, well, there's many different approaches, and I don't think there's a one-size-fits-all. You are a salty bag of meat, and you run on pre-programmed patterns of behavior. And we really don't know why we do things. So one of the best things that you can do is kind of try everything on for size, you know, try it on, you know, say, I'm going to do this for 3 days, 5 days. It fits me. And if it does, I'll keep it. And if it doesn't, I'll get rid of it. So I would usually start with guided breathing, because I think when people are experiencing stress, anxiety, overwhelm, holding that focus is very difficult for them, because everything's very distracting. There's no clarity there. So you have to give them a tool in guided breathing. So I get MP3s and videos and stuff that I give to people to help them just follow along the process until you've got the process and you understand the process. And I take them through a process just to begin to wind that down and just find that little bit of space for them. So breathing is usually my first point of call. And certainly in the office here, I'll test people's heart rate variability, and we'll look at coherence, and we'll do breathing exercises and stuff like that. That is part and parcel of getting them to a point where they can think again, because that whole stress and overwhelm affects people. And so by slowing things down, they can then begin to think. And the whole thing about stress and anxiety is people usually feel that it's all happening to them. It's not of their doing. They're not in charge. They're not in control. So it's about getting people back to a place of cause, where they feel that actually they're the ones now making the decisions, so that when they do something, something happens, and that makes me feel better because it creates some certainty. And when I've got a little bit of certainty, everything doesn't feel quite as out of control. So it's about getting people to a place of cause, things down. But of course, the more certain they are about things and the less uncertain, the calmer things are. So the stress level comes down, and it just builds, and the momentum just builds every time. So, but my first port of call is usually breathing for people. You can get you breathing, and then we can look at some other things, NLP techniques, even other techniques that are well known within the hypnotherapy community, that are all variations on EMDR, IEMT, that kind of cross-hemispheric type.
So Greg, I'm going to stop you for a minute, because you're tossing out a lot of terms that people might not understand if they're not familiar with this field. So can you back up and tell us, sort of start with what is NLP and then go on to some of these other terms so we know what they are.
So NLP is an interesting thing because it sometimes gets a bit of a bad rap. And I think a lot of that's got to do with the sort of the nomenclature that's used. Even just that word programming, you suddenly see people go, oh, it sounds like a cult. You It's got those kind of connotations when it's really not. It's just a collection of observations about people's behavior that can be sort of generalized, but it's tools and techniques that allow you to make change. Then we go on to the sort of other fringe things. You've got EFT, or tapping, as it's commonly known. And again, there's lots of tools and techniques out there that we use that are very effective. Do people know why they work? Well, people have an opinion as to why they work, but nobody actually knows why they work. So there's a great NLP technique, again, for changing feelings. And you're very much focusing on how a feeling feels. So the first thing I'd say to somebody is, okay, so this feeling that you've got, firstly, where can you locate it in your body? And that's a strange question because people usually pause for a second and think, well, I suppose it's here. Okay, right, okay. And then you would go in and you explore the building blocks of that feeling. So if that feeling had a color, what color would that feeling be? And usually most people tell you straight away because it's an unconscious thing. So in a sort of confused way, because they've never thought about a feeling having a color before.
Right.
But as you start to explore how we know we're having a feeling, and people will say, oh, it feels like this, or it's spiky, or it feels like a ball, or it feels like a rough black, and they'll go in and they'll describe the actual, how we think about the feeling. And then if you begin to change elements of that, so in spinning, what we'd do is we'd find where the feeling is, the color, any textures, all the things that make up that feeling, and the direction of the movement of the feeling, because feelings aren't static. Feelings are a sort of organic thing. And when you say to somebody, which way does it seem to be moving? Is it pulsing? Is it spinning? Is it going like that? Is it going up and down, back and forwards? And people always can go, oh, actually, it's doing this, or it's doing that, and they'll always greatly, with huge amounts of surprise, go, oh, actually, weirdly, it's doing this. And if you slow that down until the feeling stops, and then you begin to do the opposite. So if it was going up and down, you'd move. It was spinning clockwise or anti-clockwise, you'd spin it the other way. If it was moving back and forward, you might move it this way. And you just do the opposite feeling. And the amazing thing is that it changes the feeling. So the first thing that people will notice is that the color changes. So the minute you move the feeling in a different direction, it's yellow now. That's weird, isn't it? And then you say, well, so how does it feel? Well, it feels different. Does it feel better? Yeah. There's no cognitive or logical explanation for that.
Mm-hmm. It sounds like a great technique when you're aware of it, but if you're in a situation that's sort of stressful or aggravating, and I think a lot of us, you have to take a step back in order to use this technique. So what does a person do sort of when they're surprised by something? I had this happen to me fairly recently. I just got blasted. I was in an environment I hadn't been in since I was 6 years old, and I walked in and I just got bombarded with emotions from that time period. And there was no stepping back from that moment. So like for a situation like that, what does a person do?
In that sort of situation, it's still possible to do the spinning thing, because it's actually, the way that I would describe it and the way that I would teach somebody to do it makes it quite a long process. Once you're familiar with it, it's really quite simple. So number one, where's my feeling? How do I know I'm feeling this feeling? Well, it's tight here. Okay. So if I just tune into that for a second, what color is it? Okay, it's that color. Okay, what's it doing? It's doing this. Okay, let me feel down. Okay, let me do something else with it. Let me spin it, or let me push it that way instead. How's that feeling? Okay. And it just takes a few seconds to do. It's not a long process at all. Breathing, doing a breathing. So the ratio that I use with my clients for breathing is 4-2-6-2. So breathe in for 4, hold for 2, breathe out for 6, hold for 2. You only have to do that for about 90 seconds for physiological changes to kick in and your parasympathetic nervous system to switch on and everything to start to. So you can do a lot of these things really right. You know, maybe it's a social situation or a work situation where all of a sudden you find yourself in a highly stressful or emotionally reactive situation. The single thing that you can do without saying, excuse me a moment while I just go and focus on my feelings and the colors and all the submodalities that make up that emotion and feel, is breathing. That's the single best thing you can do, because you're just counting 4-2-6-2. And one of the big parts of 4-2-6-2 is because you're counting. So you're not winding yourself up by thinking, oh my God, and what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if, because you can't think about two things at the same time. It's impossible. So if you're counting and you're breathing, you're keeping this busy while you turn on the physiological relaxation response. And within 90 seconds, the physiological your stress hormones and all those chemicals will start to turn down, and you'll just start to calm down. And you come out of that overwhelmed, panicky, and because we tend to hold our breath when we become stressed and overwhelmed as well. Just going into that breathing of, and just tapping it out. You're counting and tapping with your finger on your thigh, and you just, nobody knows you're doing it.
Okay.
And you can just wind and calm things down and just take a moment and just stop the chatter in your head and just, right, okay, yeah. So 90 seconds has gone by and the world hasn't ended. Okay, what's next? My number one go-to tool would always be breathing.
I started a meditation technique, meditation practice, I guess about 6 months ago now, and it's made the hugest impact in my life.
Yeah.
Like almost within a few days of starting it, made this massive impact.
When I'm working with people who are having difficulty making changes, they're stuck. It's the one thing that I will say is breathing is the one thing that if you do it twice a day for 3.5, 4 minutes of breathing, because that's not so much of a demand on people's time. If you say to me, I don't have 4 minutes to feel better, well then you keep doing what you're doing. Because of course you can find 4 minutes. And it's fine to say, well, a 20-minute meditation practice or a 30-minute MP3, but you really have to diarize that. You really have to schedule that. Whereas to say to somebody, 4 minutes to feel better, you can manage that. And as soon as people go, oh, yeah, okay, 4 minutes, and they do it for 4 minutes and they feel a little bit better. And as soon as they've got that into the routine of a couple of times a day, they can use it as a reactive tool. So like in your situation, you go into something and think, oh, I'm feeling stressed, I need to breathe now. Or if you were about to go into a stressful situation, so say you're going for an interview or you're going into something where you have to make a presentation or something, and you've identified those feelings and you think, okay, do I spin my feelings or do I breathe? I'll do a bit of breathing. So you can use it as a preemptive tool, a reactive tool, or you can just do that sort of 4 or 5 minutes every day, twice a day, that just helps you.
So talking to the clarity point. So I know a lot of people who struggle with perfect, finding clarity on what they're, there's a lot of talk about, live your passions and have your dream, blah, blah, blah. And then I think a lot of people are like, well, I don't know what those are and how do I get the perfect one? And so can you talk a little bit to that, apart from the whole, the live your passions thing being a little over touted?
I think that live your passions is fine, but that means that you have to know what your passion is.
Right.
And one of the biggest questions, I mean, it's probably the question I pretty much start every client session with is, what do you want? And very, very few people can concisely tell you what they want. And sometimes that's okay. That's fine. But at least if you know what your options are. But the whole idea of that there's a perfect blueprint, and I think it's more of a problem in today's society because of social media, because of the ever-present nature of the virtual perfect life that nobody's really living. And that puts additional pressure on people to think, oh, well, I should be like that, or I should have this, or I should be living a certain life, and there's a lot of pressure for the square peg in the round hole. And people trying to conform, and people thinking, oh, I should be like that, rather than thinking, yeah, well, what do you want? How do you want to be? Because there's a confusion because, well, I don't know, I've never thought about it. And if people do give you an answer, they'll generally give you a stream of all the things that they don't want. Oh, well, I don't want this, and I don't want to feel this, and I don't want to feel like this anymore, and I don't want to see this person anymore, and I don't want this in my life. Okay, so let's go back through that list and reframe it in a way that, what do you want? So the notion of square peg and round hole, I think it's a real challenge today.
What do you do for your clients to help them find that clarity? So, I mean, I think maybe starting from what you don't want is a good starting place for a lot of people. Yeah,
because generally when people are stressed and overwhelmed, they're looking for threat. They perceive threat in everything. So they're far more able to tell you about all the things that are in their radar that are negative. So that's fine, okay. It gives you a lot of information about, okay, so we don't want that. So what's the opposite of that? So what do we want? So I would use some very simple steps. A lot of the time I go for environment, first of all. So looking for people's environments, because it's one of the simplest things that people can change. I've got some worksheets and stuff that I use with people that are all based around sort of criteria, options, and possibilities. Most people who are stuck feel like they have no option. When in actual fact, the reality is they've got so many options, it's overwhelming, which is why they're stuck.
Right.
It's like, okay, you could change your name and move to the south of France and start making pizza ovens. Oh, I suppose I could do that. Right, so there we go. That's one option. What's the next option? And when you start to explore it with people, you begin by discounting all the things that don't want. Okay, so I don't want to move to the south of France and start making pizza ovens. Okay, so we then look at the criteria and the possibilities. So you kind of work them through together. You get it as well with people if they're looking for career moves and stuff like that. You look at, so what's the criteria? You know, what is it in your current situation that you want or you don't want? Then what are the options that are available to you right now? And then what are the possibilities moving forwards? So you can start to build up a framework of actually what you want by breaking it down into the smaller blocks. But the criteria is one of the big things. What fulfills me? What do I enjoy doing to an extent? What makes me content? But then it all comes down to that ecological nature. It's fine if I say, oh, well, I want to go and I want to be this or I want to do that. But at what cost to all the other areas of your life? So when you start to live your dream or do, I'm going to do this, I'm going to go off and do this. I've quit my job today and I've gone off and I've done this. Okay, yeah, but now you're going to lose your house. You know, your partner's going to leave you and you're going to be living in a box. So maybe that's not an ecological decision. You're looking at the building blocks of that, what it gets the person in the end, because there's this notion of chunking. Are you familiar with chunking?
Can you elaborate?
I can. So chunking is about taking something that somebody says. So the common one I get with business people and entrepreneurs is they'll say, oh, I want to earn 150 grand this year, or 200 grand this year, or 300 grand this year. Okay, what does that get you? So let's say you've earned your 150 grand, your 300 grand. What now? What's that done for you? Well, to buy this or do this or get this car or live in this house. Okay, good. And once you're living in that house and you're driving that Tesla and you're doing whatever it is you're doing, what then? What's that done for you? Oh, well, then I'll be respected by my peers, or I'll be this, that, the other. Okay. And once you're respected by your peers, what does that do for you? Oh, well, I suppose it gives me a feeling of, and you're basically looking at each thing and chunking it up to a size where you're actually trying to find what's the underlying thing that the person is looking for. And I can let you into a secret. That's it.
So the video just froze. You said, I can let you into a secret, and the video just froze.
Again, almost like I planned it. Happiness, fulfillment, and contentment. That's what everybody wants. Right. And we get distracted by all the things that we think will lead us to that, when actually that's actually what we want. It's not the money that we want, and it's not the house, and it's not the car, and it's not the beach house, and it's not the exotic holidays, and it's not that. It's actually happiness. And I think from my point of view, I'm very fortunate that I reached a point in my life where I understood myself and I understood the motivations and the drivers for what makes me tick and what motivates me. And that's such a fortunate thing to have. So I always try to help people to get to know the salty bag of meat now, because if you can work out what it is that's going to tick your boxes and give you those top lines, that contentment, the fulfillment, the sense of achievement, or whatever it is for you, if you can work out what your salty bag of meat needs, it's so easy to give it to it. It really is. And then you become more congruent with yourself, and it's not that square peg in the round hole anymore, because you're moving in the same direction as your unconscious needs, and you're not battling against them. So you have a much smoother ride. Of all the different groups of people that I work with, they all have the same problems. They're just different groups of people. Right. They just have different labels, but we all fundamentally have the same issues, and we all encounter the same challenges. And it's the C word, confidence.
Not car.
The C word, confidence. And in coming back to NLP, confidence is what we would call a nominalization. So a nominalization, the simple way to think about it is a verb that's turned into a noun. And you can't put it in a wheelbarrow, it's a nominalization. So confidence isn't a thing, because what makes me confident is very different from what makes you confident. And I've reached a conclusion now that confidence is a mixture of belief and internal dialogue. Now, if you have positive belief and you have positive internal dialogue, boom, you have confidence. But if you have positive belief but negative internal chatter, it's going to be a bumpy ride. And if you've got negative belief and negative internal dialogue, that's when things aren't good.
So I understand you have a free gift for the audience, which sounds to me like it's probably pretty valuable.
Yeah, I mean, I'm really happy to be able to say, yeah, there's a free coaching call on offer. It's for So it might be if you're feeling stressed and you're looking for some tools, or you want to discuss, how can I just find a little bit of space? It might be just to get a little bit of clarity, as we said, about what do you want? How do I work out what it is I want? I don't know what I want. So we could start with, what don't you want? It might be practical things like when it comes to scheduling and productivity and motivation, whatever it is for you. But yeah, we've got some coaching calls, half-hour coaching calls with me that I'm happy to do for people attending Perfection Rejection, and we can jump on a call.
I love that. Thank you so much. It's very generous of you. And I thank you for your time being here. This has been very educational.
Well, we've spoken before, and I can talk all day on it, because I just love to talk about change and understanding. And if we can understand ourselves and just find that little bit of space, it's amazing what you can do and what you can